There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur, or sharpness to crystal clarity. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
There's a lot of undecided things about so, I mean, the good thing about California, the process is that the team is required to do many alternatives.
We live here all our lives. We don't have to say, state, county,
It's been confirmed, we're broadcasting live as well. Okay. You can't get there, you can't get the person sitting right in that corner. Oh, okay, cool. You could I think you could, well, if you don't, and we'll find out right away, but if not, I don't know whose names are yet. Yeah. I'll probably get to introduce us. I'll look at their name cards. Yeah. That's John. And there's only two other people. Yeah. John. Oh, that's third class. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Johnson. So, anyways, you definitely have anybody that talks up here. And then we'll take, and then we'll switch. If that's the case, then I'll be doing my best. Okay. And then I think this is named for us.
Let's put the output up on VCs.
I will definitely want to show you how to do this today. Okay. All right. Yeah, we're just going to basically say, ready, push button. And do it. You got to push it out, take it over that corner and take it back.
So interesting that stretch just.
Well, I don't know why I came here tonight. I got the feeling that something ain't right. I'm so scared in case I fall off my chair, and I'm wondering how I'll get down the stairs. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Yes, I'm stuck in the middle with you, and I'm wondering what it is I should do. It's so hard to keep the smile from my face. Losing control, yeah, I'm all over the place. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. When you started out with nothing and you're proud that you're a self-made man, and your friends, they all come calling, slap you on the back and say, please, please. Try to make some sense of it all, but I can see it makes no sense at all. Is it cool to go to sleep on the floor? 'Cause I don't think that I can take anymore. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. And you started out with nothing and you're proud that you're a self-made man, and your friends, they all come calling, slap you on the back and say, please, please. Yeah, I don't know why I came here tonight. I got the feeling that something ain't right. I'm so scared in case I fall off my chair, and I'm wondering how I'll get down the stairs. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Yes, I'm stuck in the middle with you. Stuck in the middle with you. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you.
I do not mind.
Post, P-O-S-T, P-O-S-T, the cereals you like the most. The cereals made by Post take you to the secret mountain retreat of Captain Video, Master of Space, Hero of Science, Captain of the Video Rangers. Operating from his secret mountain headquarters on the planet Earth, Captain Video rallies men of goodwill and leads them against the forces of evil everywhere.
As he rockets from planet to planet, let us follow the champion of justice, truth, and freedom throughout the universe. Stand by for Captain Video and his Video Rangers.
Yeah, really highly secure. All over there.
All right. So there's no, okay.
You know, just, I understand our next building, there's like a food record. Right.
Okay.
Good morning. Great.
Yeah.
Great, that's right. Great, Dan Henry dropped you off.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Great.
I didn't recognize you, but that's your dad.
Oh, yeah.
It'll be on the website. All right, so no, money gave me a ride.
Oh,
Good morning. Good morning. So,
it's just, it's the next, yeah, it's not the sheriff. Across the sheriff parking lot. I was told there was a breakfast.
right.
Free.
I've been here for 24 years. My dad was so started out in New York, and then when I was 5, I was moved to New York when I was 12. Yeah, I wish I had appreciated it. Oh, totally. Because I was every time we did vacations and stuff, you know, I went to Turkey and France. Yeah, everything's so a lot of changes. Oh, yeah. My kids went to school here, kindergarten, graduated, my daughter's 30, getting married in October. Where is she? She's in West Beach. Oh, right. Yeah, she's just, and my son just turned 22, and he too was he's living at home.
Yeah, that's why you do it. But he's just outside of that. But he's just not on a permanent basis. So, yeah, he's doing that. And he works at a program. He's in the engine shop. And he's firefighter. They call him. And he gets ready for shifts. He's ready to get
White onions.
Well, you don't smell like it.
Environmental footprint across the
You want to put a new person in the actually room right next to the time, so that way you can not well. Yeah, you'd have to, you'd have to go to the restroom and okay.
Everything's clean.
It's a lot more expensive. It's also much more expensive. It's about
I think we want to try to get started on time here, please. Good morning and welcome to our second scoping meeting for the environmental review process put on by the team we have in place here to work with us. So we appreciate it. It's a beautiful day here in the city. Eileen again will be facilitating the meeting along with introducing her professional staff. So we'll get started and turn it over to Eileen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I see a lot of familiar faces, but I see some new faces too. So for those of you who were here on Monday night, bear with me. I'm going to ask some of the same questions that you heard in the beginning and kind of get everybody oriented. So how many people were not with us on Monday night? If you have a show of hands. So we do have about, looks like a half a dozen folks. So for the presenters, I think we should go ahead and do the extended play PowerPoint. And then I obviously the counter to that is how many people were here on Monday night. And then looks like 2/3 of the audience. And then how many of you were here and had an opportunity to come to the meeting that was held in November of 2012? All right, just a couple. And then February of 2013, I understand there was another meeting that was both a morning and an evening. So about 1/3 of the audience was here, has been to previous meetings. So that's very helpful to know. Again, my name's Eileen Goodwin. There will be, I'll give an introduction to our team here in just a moment after I get a chance to go through some of the housekeeping. The restrooms are around behind the gentleman right here who's got the camera. Both men's and women's. Please feel free to take a rolling break should you need it. We will not be having a formal break during this morning's meeting. This is planning to go to noon, although I will tell you Monday night we were able to adjourn the meeting a little early after everyone had had a chance to get their comments heard. As you're probably aware, this is a formal scoping meeting. As a result, it's a little more formal than a typical community meeting. And we will be taping your comments so that we ask that you come up by Caroline. She will be giving you a timed system up here on the PowerPoint screen so you can see what approximately 2 minutes looks like. I was pretty loose with cutting people off, but I did ask that after a little over 2 minutes, if you would let other people that hadn't spoken go through, and then we brought back people who had additional things to say. That's how we'll be working it again today. I will be fairly generous with the time, but again, if you've got really 2 big chunks of things to say, I'm going to ask that you see what other people get through in case people have places to go and they want to get their comments in this morning and get out of here to go do some things. As you probably see, there's also some television cameras here. And that is being done by the community. That is not part of the project team. The project team is, as I mentioned, doing an audio recording to make sure we capture your comments as you say them. There are 2 pieces, 2 handouts. One is the agenda and some information, and it does have a fact sheet on the back side, so you would definitely want a copy of that. And then we ask that you use the comment form. Really what I need is your name, and if you want to give an affiliation, an email address, etc., that's fine. I will not be reading all that, but I do use these as a way to just order who's speaking and in what order, and I will call you in the order that I get a copy of your comment card from the audience. If you do not wish to speak, there's a box here that says, I will be making oral comments, so I don't need you to rewrite all of what you're planning to say. You just say, I'm planning to do this out loud. If you would prefer that either I read your comments into the record or you just hand them in and we make it part of the record, go ahead and just indicate that there, that you would either like me to read it or just for the record, and do not check the oral box. And as I said, I'll be bringing people up to in order that I get those cards. A couple other things that's very helpful for the project team to find out is how you heard about the meeting, what worked to get people here this morning. So I'm going to ask you, and you can raise your hand in more than one of these. How many people saw the ad in the newspaper? 1, 2. Okay, just a couple. How many of you got a card to your home or office? There was actually mailings done. It looks like a few of you got one of those. How about email? You got an email blast from the city or from something? Okay, about half of you got that. How many of you were told by word of mouth? Somebody told you, hey, okay, so that's really where we're getting a lot of people are word of mouth today. I do know it was on public TV. Did anybody see the announcement on public TV? Okay. And I know it was posted on the city website, so for those of you who check that regularly, a couple of you, oh great, that's very impressive. That's very unusual that you would have that many proactive people on the city website, so I congratulate you on that. PowerPoint is up on the website. On Monday we said we would post that, and the city did get that posted. It was up on, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday this week, so it's already up here. So if you see anything on here that you wanted to take notes about, it's already up on the website. You can either download it when you get home, or you can probably see it on your phone if you've got a fancy phone. The website is the city website. There's also ability to get comments in by the end of the month, and that information is on your comment card sheet here in the box, and you can mail it in. And if you don't have something to say today, you might want to take the comment card, and then you can make your comment, put a little piece of tape and a stamp on it, it's already addressed, mail it in, or you could fax that same thing, or just a plain piece of paper into the fax number that's provided, or you can make your comments via an email, and there's an email address on the agenda sheet for you there. Okay, so there's my there's all the housekeeping. Just wanted to introduce my team here. Rob Kaltberger is the project manager on behalf of the city of Half Moon Bay, and Rob has been the point person for the city on this project. I want to also introduce Alex is here. He's the assistant city manager, and he's able to join us today. We thought he may or may not be able to join us, but he's here auditing the meeting. Ramsey Kisson, he's there in the blue shirt. You'll hear from Ramsey in just a moment. He's an engineer with URS Corporation. They are the firm that was hired to do some of this planning work and engineering work on the bridge project. John Hessler in the red, you'll hear quite a bit from. John is with David Powers and Associates, and his responsibility on the project team is to write the environmental document. So you'll be hearing about what he goes through to do that work and what's in an environmental document. Mike Garavaglia. Mike is a historic bridge expert, and he's available for the Q&A. His expertise is in historic structures, and because this bridge is historic, it's appropriate to have somebody with his expertise on the team, and he and John will probably tag team some of the questions that you might have. As I mentioned, scoping meeting, so again, a little bit more formal. However, on Monday, we were able to get some answers out back where we had information that we asked the project team if they could answer those questions. They did their best to do that. Some of your questions are, the data is not there yet, so we'll try and make that clear if that's the case. And some people just make comments, and that's perfectly appropriate in a scoping meeting to make a comment or to ask a question that needs further review, because that's really what the meeting's all about, is to get input from the community. So as I said, we're about to go through, and I will go through a few slides here to orient you. Then we'll ask both Ramsey and John to speak, and then we'll go through the formal Q&A period. Does anybody have any questions about the meeting format before I start into more of the content? Yes, sir.
I was a little bit late. Did you say the comments are limited to 2 minutes?
What we've done is we'll go, I'll be generous with the 2 minutes. It's a generous 2 minutes, but if you really have 5 or 10 minutes of something to say, I will be cutting you off probably before around 3 minutes, to be honest, and then ask you to go again. So on Monday night, some people went 2 or 3 times to get their comments in, but it's just a courtesy to make sure those people who, everybody gets the same amount of time, and if you want to go again, I'll certainly call you back up. I'm happy to do that. That way people can go if they want to just get their comments in and they have other places that they need to be. Okay, next, the goals and the purpose of the meeting. I think I have outlined some of them already, but the purpose is to talk about the Main Street Bridge project, so that's what we're here about today. There are a couple of alternatives that Ramsey will be reviewing. Provide an overview of the environmental process, that's John here in the red shirt, and to listen and where we can provide information and answers today, but really to listen to the comments that you have and as best we can answer any questions that we can get answered today. Okay, so I'm aware that this project is one of controversy here in Half Moon Bay, and there's not consensus on necessarily the purpose for the project or the need for the project. And I understand that there was a group of community members who proposed a ballot initiative. I understand that went to the city council to put on the ballot. It's also my understanding that the city council has its own initiative on the ballot, and that all of that was voted on February 18th at a city council meeting, and that those ballot measures are currently going forward for the June 2014 ballot. So just kind of for those of you who wonder whether we know that as a project team, we are aware of that as a backdrop for this meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ramsey, who's got a few comments, and then he'll turn it right to John, and then we'll get taking your comments.
Just talk about the bridge a little bit. The bridge is a reinforced concrete bridge, one of the first in San Mateo County, built in about 1900. It has 2 lanes, 24 feet wide, 80 feet in length, and the west sidewalk was placed in the 1940s and carries a water main. The east side sidewalk was added approximately in 1991, and the bridge is on Half Moon Bay's historic resources and is eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. The state is responsible for inspecting the bridge every 2 years, and they come up with a bridge inspection report. And currently the rating is 24 out of 100. The inspection reports we have reports going back to 1941 to 56. Between 56 and 79, there were no reports. The responsibility was delegated to the county. And from 70 to 2013, there are reports, and the summary of the reports are back there on that chart back there. The southeast retaining wall and wing wall collapsed somewhere between 1941 based on the records. There's heavy cracking, displacement in the wing walls, corroded brackets carrying waterline sidewalk, and no shoulders, and there are ADA issues. And inadequate sight distance issues. The primary purpose of the project is to address existing deficiencies so that we achieve a crossing that is safe, efficient, reliable over the long term. Next. And the project objectives, again, is to bring a bridge that is structurally sufficient based on current design and seismic safety criteria. The other objective is to maintain at least 1 lane of traffic during construction. Use federal funding to minimize fiscal impacts to the city. Minimize and avoid impacts during construction. And minimize and avoid environmental impacts to Velocitas Creek ecosystem and the historic bridge itself. So with this, the alternatives are no project, do nothing, a rehabilitation of the existing bridge and widening the bridge, and a replacement alternative. With that, I'd like to turn it over to John to talk about the environmental process.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to see a lot of you again, and for those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. what I'm here to do is give you a little bit of an overview of the environmental process. So as I said on Monday night, something very important to say at the onset. There's been a lot of information and a lot of stuff going out there that a decision has already been made, and that this meeting is just a formality and it's not going to really count because the decision has been made. I'm here to say categorically that it is not true. Today we are at the beginning of what is going to be 2 years of studies and analysis, and I'm going to walk you through that. But there are a lot of laws and regulations that have to be followed, and the process is very, very strict. So this is a process where lots of alternatives are going to be looked at before any decision is made. So I just need to make that very, very clear. The two main laws that kind of govern everything and why we're here today is the first one. There's the California Environmental Quality Act, and then the federal version of the California law is called the National Environmental Policy Act. And what those say is before you do anything, before any project is approved, analysis has to be done so all the facts are out on the table. It's all about public disclosure and public input, and input from other agencies is a key part of that. There's a lot of give and take that goes on. So again, that's the primary purpose, so that at the end of the day, whenever a decision is made, nobody can say that they didn't know about a certain positive or negative aspect of a given project. In this case, we also have two other laws which I want to talk about. The National Historic Preservation Act comes into play here because, as has already been mentioned, this bridge is definitely an historic resource. It's a city historic resource. It's also eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. The Department of Transportation Act, this is a law going back to like 1966, I believe, which says when federal funding is being used on a project, which is the case here, that funding shall not be used when there is a historic resource present unless there are no prudent and feasible alternatives. So, in plain language, what that means is we have an historic bridge. We have a project that's going to affect that bridge. There may be multiple alternatives. Everything from rehab to widening to demolition. At the end of the day, you have to choose the alternative that has the least damage to the historic resource. So that's a very important consideration here. All other things being equal, you have to go with the alternative that has the least damage and has, basically the least effect on that resource. So that's a key thing to keep in mind. Next slide, please. So again, overview, this is what we're all about in the environmental process. Disclosure of information before any decision is made. Alternatives, big thing. Lots of times somebody proposes a project with a certain objective. My job is to also look at, are there alternatives that could achieve that same objective, but would have less of an environmental impact? So that's part of the story we tell in the document. We have a whole team of experts, biologists, archaeologists, historians, hydrologists, hazardous material specialists that are going to be doing all the studies. And we don't take any sides. Our job is to just put out the facts. And then input. Public input is a key part of this, and that's why we're here today, step one in that. This is just kind of an overview of some of the subjects that we're going to be looking at in the environmental document. It's not an exhaustive list, but these are the ones that are definitely going to be at play here. For example, traffic. Traffic during construction is a big issue. The community has spoken, the downtown version's loud and clear. That's going to be a key consideration are what are the impacts of the various alternatives during construction. Obviously, historical. We have Mike Cavalier here on the team. Mike has been brought in specially to help the design team look at ways to address the issues and at the same time avoid or minimize impacts on the historic bridge. Biology, you've got a number of endangered species right there at that creek, so that has to be addressed. The Pilorcitos Creek corridor is a sensitive habitat, so that all has to be studied. Let's see, what else? Noise during construction, disruption, those are gonna be key issues. Next slide. I put this slide together just to kind of give you all an overview of some of the agencies that are going to be involved in this. It's quite an impressive list of agencies that will either have approval authority or will be you have to consult with, or they're going to have to issue permits. First, at the top, of course, is the Half Moon Bay City Council. Caltrans is involved on this project because Caltrans is administering the federal dollars. They come from the Federal Highway Administration, and then it goes down through the various state departments of transportation. In this case, in California, it's Caltrans. They administer the funds, and they are in an overview role. They're not an approval role. They're giving an overview to make sure that the city and all local agencies comply with all the regs that are in place. State Historic Preservation Office up in Sacramento, they're going to be involved because of the historic nature of the bridge. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, again, we have federally listed endangered species. We need to consult with them. The same with the National Marine Fisheries Service because of some of the fisheries issues in the creek. Army Corps of Engineers is going to have to issue a permit. California Department of Fish and Wildlife, another permit. Regional Water Quality Control Board, another permit. And then another one finally from the California Coastal Commission. So all these agencies are going to be providing input as we go through the process. So back to where we started, public input, extremely important. The way the process works is we hear from you initially, that's today. I and the team go back and do all of our analysis. We put together a draft report that gets released. Right now we're anticipating summer of 2015 when that draft report, it'll go out for public circulation. It'll be at 45 days for public input. We want to hear from you at that point. Did we do the analysis properly? Did we miss anything? Did we not address alternatives properly? Whatever it is, we need to hear that feedback. Then our job in preparing the final is to take all the comments, and we have to prepare good faith responses. And by good faith, we're not going to just say, oh, thanks for your comment, on to the next one. If you tell us, if you give us information, my job is to really look at that information and say, yes, you're right. We screwed up on something, we omitted something, so we're going to go back and fix it in the final. Or I may say, thanks for the information, here's how it was addressed. But again, it's another opportunity for input from the public. And then finally, on the final document, which right now we're anticipating is going to be done in early 2016, there will also be opportunity for public input. So the whole process is designed to have input back and forth and give and take throughout the whole process. So today is just the beginning of that. And as Eileen said, there are various opportunities to get in your comments orally, email, fax, and snail mail. So anyway, that is an overview of what's going to be happening, and I appreciate your attention. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So again, those comments by the end of the month, please, to be helpful for John to be able to scope out some of the work that he needs to prepare and get all the subs to get out there in the field and do the work so he can write the document. So it's before the closing remarks, so we need to get to the timing if we could, Caroline. So again, as I mentioned, we will be doing the countdown. I'm going to be generous. And I do already have 5 speakers. I know about a 6. So how many who have either not given me a card, know they want to speak? I know I have an additional, you're number 6. And then it looks like the gentleman who just came in is also planning to speak. And so here's another one. And another one, and another one. So right now we've got about 8 people. And again, what somebody says might inspire some of the rest of you to fill out your forms. And looking at Jim there, because he waited to the end on Monday. So with that, if you would come up near Caroline and speak near that microphone that we have right on that desk, that would be great. And Bill Estevez, you are our first speaker. Thank you. And just so you know, Lenny, you are going to be our second speaker. You'll follow Bill. You can keep it on the table, you can hold it either way.
My name is Bill Steves, long-term residence here. The thing is with the bridge, the way on the north side where it's going down, because the Juicy Ranch had a dam. Back in 1980, they were forced to take the dam out or be a heavy fine. Ever since that happens, all the wood and crap, excuse my language, has washed down and blocked the creek. And all the water has to go on the north side and go around the bridge. So it's taking land away. So that's why the bridge is dropping like it is today. If you take the bridge out, a lot of our history is going to be lost. And right now, we are losing our history to this community is going downhill really fast. 51, we lost our Catholic Church because some priests wanted a garage. Now, we want to tear out the bridge because we want to make it wider for big trucks to come through instead of using Kelly Avenue. I just say, I have seen Happy change, but not for the better, it's for the worse. We had stores here, Coley stores, everything. We have nothing. And the people here have to travel over to San Mateo or Burlingame to buy their clothes. They can't buy it anymore like they used to. And if you hear part of the history of this community, what we're going to have left? You know, I've shared out the Johnson house, all the old houses we have here, there's a lot of history that our grandfathers and our forefathers put in. It's a shame to see a community that was rich in history is losing it. And it hurts very much. I've been here all my life. I've seen a lot of things. I talked to the old timers who told me stories about this place. Now they're all gone. So I'm one of the old timers right now myself, so I'm trying to save the bridge because all you have to do is I talked to an engineer who was here checking out the bridge. He says if they put supports on the north side to hold the bridge up, that bridge will stay there for its life, and maybe longer. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Bill. I didn't really hear a question in there. Good information about the dam coming out, and thank you for the comments about history. Lenny, you're our second speaker. And Lenny will be followed by George Mutlow.
Good morning.
Good morning. If we could get you a little closer to the microphone, that would be awesome. Thank you.
I'm Lenny Roberts, and I'm speaking for Committee for Green Liberals. Our organization has been around for 50 years, and we have a special interest in the coast. Many of our members live here, and many of our members visit. So, Mr. Hessler, at the scoping meeting Monday night,
excuse me, I'm being asked about, yes?
Hard to hear.
Oh, if you could be a little louder. Lenny, we need you to speak up like me. That microphone is going into a tape recorder. It's not a microphone, so it's a different type of microphone. If that's the right one. Go ahead, if you just put your back to maybe the panel right there, that's good, and just speak up, and maybe we can get that Mike maybe over on the other table. We'll get on forward, we get over to, Mike has the mic now. There we go. Okay, Lenny, so if you wouldn't mind, start again. Go ahead and we'll get Caroline to give you your time back. Thank you for flagging that wasn't,
Thanks.
you weren't able to hear it.
Oh, I have a cold.
Yeah.
Okay,
So you're representing Committee for Green Foothills, you have an interest in the coast.
Yes, we do. So at the scoping meeting Monday night, Mr. Hessler, and you stated again this morning a couple of things. You said this is the beginning of the process. There's been a lot of misinformation going on, that a decision has already been made. I am here categorically, you said, that to say that is not true. Well, with all due respect, I have to disagree. The City Council, which is the decider on this issue, has already selected on September 13th, 2013, option 2 as their preferred alternative, which is the replacement of the Main Street Bridge. In fact, every single action of the City Council concerning the fate of the bridge for the past 3 years has already predetermined that the Main Street Bridge will be destroyed and replaced with a much wider, straighter bridge. Even more troubling is that URS, Mr. Hisson's company, in signing the contract with the City of Half Moon Bay, has stipulated that the primary goal of the project is to replace the structurally deficient Main Street Bridge over Killercedos Creek with a new structurally sound bridge. Those are quotes from the contract. As a result, Committee for Green Foothills believes, as many other people do, that the CEQA NEPA process and these scoping meetings are a sham. This is why the citizens have sponsored an initiative for the November ballot, despite the City Council's efforts to put it, a revised version of it, on the June ballot, that will prohibit the demolition of the Main Street Bridge or altering its historical, visual, and physical integrity unless the voters approve. The Federal Highway Administration allows flexibility in design standards for existing historic structures such as bridges. That comes from the Highway Design FWA publication, PD 97062. Federal funding is available for repair and rehabilitation of historic bridges. We will hear this morning about a feasible, prudent, and reasonable solution that rehabilitates and maintains the historic integrity of the bridge. Section 4F, as you have already pointed out this morning, of the Federal Highway Transportation Act of 1966, which we use, requires that if there is a feasible and prudent alternative to destroying a historic structure, that alternative must be chosen. Section 4F of this act stopped Caltrans from building their destructive freeway bypass at Devil's Slide, and it will stop the demolition of this bridge, we believe. Committee for Green Foothills respectfully requests that you fully evaluate the repair, rehabilitation of the bridge, add this alternative in the environmental studies as a feasible, reasonable, and prudent alternative. If you fail to do so, you will be exposing the city to legal challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenny. George? George, you're next. Okay, and George will be followed by David Abode.
Well, first of all, Ms. Roberts stole one of my questions. Maybe I'm fortunate enough to steal one of hers, I'm not sure which, but.
Stand up. All right, George, we're gonna need you to speak up a little. I can already see we got some people who can't hear you.
Well, let's start this off. I was here at the last scoping meeting, and I have some comments, but I wanted to think about other comments. I have done so, and I will start this off with a disclaimer of, I mean no personal disrespect to anybody here, but I do have some comments that I'd like to get across. If you don't mind, I'll grab my glasses so I can read my record. Mr. Hessel, last scoping meeting, and quoted in the newspaper, you have stated there's been a lot of misinformation saying that a decision has already been made, and that's quoted. You said it again this morning. Then you went to follow up with, I'm here to categorically say this is not so. My question to you is, how can you say that? Had a decision not been made, you would not be here right now. We wouldn't be having this discussion in this room right now. Secondly, you further stated we have also asked Caltrans to independently look at the 24 and to verify that the number is accurate. The 24 is the SR rating, and that is what is at the core of this issue. That is what the council has been standing on in the decisions they've been making for the last 3 years. It's a a foundation point. Wouldn't it have been cheaper for the city to request this reevaluation before taking the action on September 17th of last year, to destroy our bridge? The third point, at this point, it was stated at the last scoping meeting that a forensics exam of the bridge will be performed. Shouldn't that also have been done before the city took the action that brought us all here today? I guess one of the questions that I would have is, that I think is important to all the citizens in Half Moon Bay, is how much is this collection of experts, you and all the people that you've said you're going to bring into this process, and the CEQA process, going to cost Half Moon Bay residents? Shouldn't and couldn't that cost have been avoided had the city asked for the double check of the SR 24 rating and the exam of the bridge before deciding to demolish the bridge? You guys have already stated you're going to do an exam on the bridge. So now we get to pay for the exam, which we should have paid for in the first place, and we get to pay for everybody that has their fingers as part of that process. Any discussion on widening the bridge, currently 22 feet wide and 80 foot long, changes the character of our historic treasure, including the whole town. To have a 22-foot bridge widened to over 40 feet on an 80-foot span is irresponsible, in my belief and my opinion. Until Caltrans provides their adjusted new rating and a forensics exam of the bridge is complete, wouldn't you think that maybe we should just stop this process? We've already spent well over $500,000. Woodside is doing the same thing. They've got 5 bridges, 2 of which are equestrian. Their first response was, instead of going out and hiring at $1.13 million someone to design, a consultant to design a bridge, their first response was, gee, let's do a forensics exam. They're getting an exam done on all 5 bridges for $159,000. If all of them were to collapse tomorrow, if a squirrel is going to break those bridges and they fall to dust, they're getting all new bridges for $5 million. We're looking at an $8 million project here in county. The money that we've spent to date is directly responsible from the city council's decision. So to say, Mr. Hessler, the decision has not been made is, if I could be so kind as to suggest you might want to reconsider your articulation when you're dealing with us, because frankly, from a personal level, I feel it's almost a slap in the face. It's almost an insult. It's almost like you're talking down to a grandkid or maybe a pet. And I don't mean any disrespect by that, but I'm being honest, and I'm asking you, all of you, to please understand the community that you're dealing with, understand our feelings, and please try to articulate your positions and your job, which you're getting paid for. We're all volunteering, and we're paying to have this done. So if you could keep that in mind going forward through this entire process, I think we might have a more harmonious process, and maybe we can come to some conclusions a little quicker. Thank you.
Okay. I did hear a couple questions from George, so particularly about the timing of the reevaluation as well as the forensic. So does somebody want to speak to that, Rob?
Thank you. Again, Rob Kaufman, I'm the project manager. I just wanted to let you know, as of yesterday, we got confirmation from Caltrans that the 24 stands. It came in at 2 o'clock yesterday, just in the afternoon. They did their reevaluation.
Can you speak louder?
Yes. The Caltrans reevaluation came in yesterday. Their number stands at 24. This will be posted on the website. As far as the money it's being talked about, I've been hearing that $500,000, this is a personal comment, I guess, as well as professional, ever since January, early January, late December. I'd like to see where those numbers are coming from, because that's not what the accounting shows. I'll just comment to that. And then as far as the testing goes, we are putting together a protocol to test the bridge and the ground under it, and figure out what to do once those tests come in as we further develop the options.
And do you have anything timing-wise for the bridge? And how will these folks find out about those results? Do they have to wait till the summer of 15, or will you be giving some of this information in the interim, or at the meeting where you were talking about planning or something?
We're having a planning meeting a little later on this spring, maybe early summer. You all will be certainly aware of that. And all the information will be going on the website as well. So I encourage you to keep your eyes on it.
Hopefully that's some new information. So thank you for your comments, George. David, you're next, followed by Dan Haggerty.
Stand here.
Yeah, that's great. And we can put the mic, if we can get the mic. Okay, David's got the mic. Thank you. That way we'll get your comments right into the machine.
I'd actually just like to address a direct question to Mr. Kalkbrenner with regards to the sufficiency rating that Caltrans was looking at. There were two parts to that evaluation. One part was, what is it as it sits today?
Can you speak a little louder?
Sorry, this is questions to him. I need them to hear it. I have a question to Mr. Kalkbrenner, and that is basically, there were two parts to the sufficiency rating that Caltrans was looking at. One part was, where is it as of today, this moment? But the other part is, where is it if we rehabilitated the bridge in situ? In other words, we didn't wind the bridge, we just rehabilitated it. Did they give you any input on that?
So the question is today, as well as future, if it were to be rehabbed, what would it get up to, I think is what you're asking.
Yes, if you'll allow me, I'll go ahead and just read it. It's a brief. Says Robert, as a follow-up on my letter of February 28th, 2014 to you, the SR of the bridge number remains unchanged at 24 as indicated in the most recent bridge inspection report. This has been confirmed by our structural maintenance investigations based on the available information.
Okay, so that doesn't address the
Sounds like it's the today rating, not the future condition.
Okay, perfect. I have a letter that's not very long. I'll just read through it and be as quick as I can. This is actually a letter that I believe I have roughly 20 people that have signed this letter, versions of it, and I think there have been some others that have been turned in.
And you're going to hand it in as part of the record today? That'd be great. Thank you, David.
Dear Mr. Kalkbrenner, I understand that the City of Half Moon Bay is preparing an environmental impact report, environmental assessment for the Main Street Bridge project, and is currently proposing to study just three alternatives: rehabilitation and widening of the existing bridge, replacement of the existing bridge, and the no project alternative, which is required for all projects. I'd like to ask you to please include a fourth alternative, which is repair and rehabilitation of the existing bridge. This alternative is reasonable and feasible and will foster informed decision making. This alternative is also responsive to the over 2,700 citizens who have signed petitions in support of preservation of the bridge's historic, visual, and physical integrity as the iconic entry to the historic downtown area of Half Moon Bay. Specifically, our repair and rehabilitation alternative would provide internal structural support for the superstructure of the bridge, as well as foundational support, which will take all of the load-bearing requirements and calculations off of the current bridge. It will be designed to not less than a 75 to 100 year lifespan. It will meet all applicable seismic safety, design, and construction standards. It will meet all Federal Highway Administration and Caltrans requirements for eligibility for federal grant funds of 88% of the total cost of the proposed project, whether under the historic provisions of the HPP or under the standard HPRRP funding. Result in a bridge that is functionally sufficient and safe for modern use as defined by Caltrans and the FHWA. Fully comply with ADA standards, address the 10-inch water main under the western sidewalk, be consistent with Half Moon Bay's Complete Streets criteria, require minimal environmental review and compliance, as the riparian areas around the bridge would be almost entirely unaffected by the repair and rehabilitation. It would allow the repair during any time of the year rather than just during the dry season. It would allow one lane of traffic to be open at all times. It would create the least significant disruption possible to local businesses. And it would result in Half Moon Bay's historic gateway to downtown being preserved intact, thereby ensuring the continued charm and old world feel that is enjoyed by residents and visitors alike. This is a reasonable and feasible alternative. We've done the groundwork and the legwork for you, and I believe Mr. Crefton is also working on a similar plan. I'd like to submit this, and if you're not going to add it to the list of feasible alternatives, I would really like to know why.
Okay.
I don't know what hands it to.
Thank you. Why don't you go ahead and hand it
Thank
to
you.
me, and I'll put it in the pile of the speakers and show that it's attached to your speech. And then can we react to that now, Rob or John, and the likelihood of this alternative?
Yeah, just we appreciate the letter, and it will be part of the public record and be part of the consideration as we move forward. Thank you.
Great. All right, so we had Dan Haggerty is speaking next, followed by Chad Hooker.
Good morning, and
Good morning, Dan.
thank you for having this meeting today. My name is Dan Haggerty from El Granada, 25-year resident. I moved down from San Francisco after being raised in San Francisco, and my whole life I've appreciated the historic nature of much of the architecture in San Francisco, and also as a child did quite a bit of traveling across to the Midwest and stopped in many small towns. So I really appreciated, one of the reasons why I moved down here to the coast side was the small town feeling. And I believe that the rural nature of this area should be protected as best as possible. I think the bridge comes into play. You know, it's a small bridge. It's been working for the city, and I think that it should be preserved. I've done quite a bit of travel in Mexico, Central America, and it's always that the town center is the most popular for tourism, and I've personally witnessed people from other countries paying a lot of attention to specific historic structures. And this is one of the reasons why I think that this bridge is very important. And I'd like to ask, you know, why not rehabilitate the bridge without widening? I'd also like to ask, has it been considered to rehabilitate the bridge and construct two new structures on either side for pedestrian and bicycle traffic that would match the existing bridge? And if you think about that, if there was essentially a 10-foot offset, someone could walk across the pedestrian bridge, look over and see the beautiful bridge, if it was repaired, at its original state. And I think that would be, it would put the bridge up a few notches in the tour books. So I would like to finish by just saying, please include testing, repairing, and rehabilitating the bridge as a feasible alternative. Thank you very much.
And if I get Ramsey, I think that you did look at some additional structures for bike and ped. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Early on, there was some discussion about alternatives to rehab the bridge, and I believe Mr. McAdoo was back here. His option was also, Mr. McAdoo's option was to provide separate bridges, and that was part of the package provided to the city. So there has been consideration, I guess.
John, do you want to speak
And
to
it will be
further consideration?
further consideration, just to answer your question directly. That is exactly, we're going to be looking at all those ideas, and we have a gentleman on the team who is an expert in exactly helping the team look at those kind of things. So your comment is heard loud and clear, and those will all be evaluated.
Thank you very much.
So Chad, followed by John Lynch.
Hi, I'm Chad Hooker. I have a couple questions and then some comments, and maybe it'd be easiest to get the questions answered as they come up. You stated at the last meeting that you had a signed contract with a Texas company. I'd like to know the name of the company and what they've been hired to do.
Okay, why don't you get your please use your 2 minutes, and then I'll take care of the questions.
Okay, you also stated at the last meeting you requested Caltrans to evaluate the sufficiency of the bridge. I understand as a result of that. And the odd thing to me is that they were already doing that, so I don't understand why they were asked to do it again. But you asked them to look at it specifically to see if their prior recommendations still stood, or you asked them to look at it in some other way?
we'll get that question answered.
Okay, so then, my comments go to the environmental issues. It feels to me like spending any time or any money studying the environmental impacts of proposed alternatives is premature for the simple reason that you don't know what the alternatives are. If there is an initiative process in June or in November that, let's say, specifically calls for one approach to dealing with the bridge, or specifically rules out other approaches, why would we have hired a geologist and an archaeologist and a structural engineer and a biologist to fiddle around in the creek if, in fact, that work may not be necessary? And dovetailed to that, it seems to me that when the city council made their decision in September to replace the bridge, it was based on the information they'd been given, at least based in part, on the information they'd been given that no structural drawings for the bridge were available. Those structural drawings have since been located, and it's pretty evident that the bridge is a significantly more sound structure than was initially assumed. So I'm wondering why the availability of those drawings and the structural information they render hasn't resulted in essentially a much more thorough re-evaluation of the approach. Okay, so there's that. And then, yeah, that's basically what I had to say.
Okay, let's take the first question first.
I do have some very specific suggestions about how the bridge could be rehabbed and upgraded, but I guess that's sort of in phase 2 of the comments here. You wanted to do a 2-minute thing and maybe come back later.
Okay, that'd be great. Yes, we can take you again. I will note that you want to come back. So, John, I believe it was a question starting with the UBET. Let's get the Texas. Sign somebody from Texas. Who is it?
So, the Texas connection is, there is a volunteer organization in Texas. I believe their name is the Historic Bridge Foundation or Historic Bridge Association. They were contacted by various citizens of Half Moon Bay who were expressing concerns about the process that was being undertaken by the city with regard to the bridge. That group contacted Caltrans and the city, and they have requested to be included in the process. I talked to their executive director. She stated that the purpose of their group is to advocate for fair treatment of historic bridges across the United States when issues like this come up, where cities, counties, and states are wanting to widen or demolish or rehab historic bridges. She said that is the reason that her group was founded, and that's what they do across the U.S. Caltrans has said in response to the inquiry from that group that yes, they will be included and provided information regarding all the alternatives. So it's not like a an engineering group that has been hired. They are, my understanding, a nonprofit. So
the city doesn't have a contract with them. They're in a participatory information.
Correct. They're akin to Committee for Green Foothills or any other group that wants to have input into a process.
Okay, the next question that Chad had was regarding the Caltrans efficiency rating and whether there was different direction given this time around and why they were requested to relook at the sufficiency
So
rating.
the background,
that's Rob or John to answer.
Well,
John?
the background on that is Caltrans was asked by Mr. Oblovi, who submitted quite a bit of information to Caltrans. I believe it was late November, early December timeframe, and based on the additional information that Mr. Oblovi had assembled, he had specifically asked Caltrans to please take another look at the 24 in view of the additional information that he had provided.
And that information included the engineering drawings?
Yes. So, the city was aware of all this, and the city realized the importance of the question, and the city has also said to Caltrans, yes, this is a good question. Obviously, if that number is not correct, we need to know that as well. So both Mr. Ablovi and the city, chimed in. Everybody was in unison in terms of asking Caltrans to please go back and take another look at that rating. And as Mr. Koch-Brenner said yesterday at about 2 o'clock, the email came in that he just read. So that is how that all came about.
Okay, the third question was to speak to how the initiative plays into the project schedule and how can you move forward if you're not quite sure what's going to go on
Right.
with those initiatives.
So what we're doing right now,
And then also, maybe you can answer this too, hirings, why do you need to hire these people now or this time frame? So I think maybe you could do both at the same time.
right. So as a team, we've talked about this, and again, the idea is we don't want to be doing something that is, depending on the initiative outcome, is going to be a waste of time or money. That's not what we are about. We want to make sure that what we're doing is going to be useful. From our perspective, let's assume we were to end up with a rehab only. It's minimal. There is still going to have to be, in our opinion, and the engineer's opinion, work down in the creek. There's going to have to be some access. All of those activities are going to require permits, and we're going to have to do certain studies to get those permits. So from our perspective, whatever the outcome of the ballot measures in June, this preliminary work that we're doing is going to be good information, and it'll be applicable to whatever outcome happens in June. So we do not view this as a waste or something that we should be holding off on because, like I said, this is all basic information that's going to be useful.
So the only way it would not be useful is if there was a no project alternative.
Right, but even there, like we're going to do the testing, right? The testing has been a lot of comments on testing. That's all going to be good information, right? So our job is to get going on this information as soon as possible so that will inform the decision.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to come back up. Is it a new topic?
No.
What is it?
The follow-up question goes to Mr. Hisson, and it is, do you think Caltrans actually took a look at those structural drawings? Do you, as a structural engineer, look at those drawings and say, well, these are essentially meaningless? We know the same thing now that we knew when we couldn't see through concrete. Now we know all these piling caps are in there, all these piles are in there. We know all the stuff about the bridge that we didn't know last September, but still it's a 24. Or do you think they just sort of looked at it and went, yeah, well, we're not going to stay at 24, there it is.
I don't know exactly how much in detail Caltrans looked at the drawings, but they were provided to them and they have them. We have looked at them in detail.
I understand you have, but do you think they're informative?
Yes.
Okay. All right, John, you're on. John will be followed by Johanna.
I'm speaking for myself and my wife Jewel when I submit this information.
Thank you.
We're both 40-year residents of Half Moon Bay, and we love it here. We want to die here. But anyhow, my letter. Please respond as to why you chose to list as option 1 the rehabilitation and widening of the existing bridge. This is now what 2,700 people who signed petitions and who desire to preserve the historic Main Street will be willing to support. If you retain option 1, please delete any reference to the widening of the bridge. If not, please add a 4th category, repair and rehabilitation of the existing bridge. Half Moon Bay's historic gateway to downtown should be preserved intact, thereby ensuring the continued charm and old-world feel that the residents and visitors like. This alternative is reasonable and feasible and will foster informed decision-making. This alternative supports the preservation of the historic bridge, visual and physical integrity to entry to the downtown Half Moon Bay. We respectfully request that the city fully repair and rehabilitation alternative as discussed above. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and I believe that that is very similar to the letter that was read earlier, and I believe they are going to go ahead and do that. So, thank you very much. All right, Johanna, followed by David Crescent. Thank you very much.
I have questions. The first one is very simple. I would like clarity that the forensic study will be ready by the spring meeting. I didn't understand if that was going to be ready. That's question one. The other one has to do with the historical aspect of the bridge. And I think I read in the paper a while ago that there had been an application for historical status for the bridge. I wanted to know if that's correct. Has it been completed? And if not, how long will it take? And then what are the implications of it becoming a historical bridge as far as funneling into this process? And I wasn't sure if you have anything.
All right, well, let's get all your questions out and then I'll get them answered. Is that it, Joanna? Okay. Number one question is clarity about the forensic study and whether or not you will wait to actually have the meeting until you have it. Rob, I think that's your question.
We don't know when it'll be completed by.
And so I think there's some question about, would you wait then until it's complete to have the meeting? Is that something you're seeing as something that could be valuable to produce at the meeting?
It would certainly be valuable to have it meeting.
So maybe that's the job one, is to try and sync those two activities up, okay? And then the second one I think is really, John, the historical, the application, the implications of it, the timing of getting that, and probably between you and Mike, you can answer that question.
So, before this whole process ever started with what to do about the bridge, two things have been known for many, many years. One is the bridge is historic, and as far as the city is concerned, it's on the city's historic resources inventory. So that's an official list maintained by the city that says it's historic. In addition, the bridge has been determined for decades that it is eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. What happened recently was that Mr. Oblovi completed a formal nomination form to actually have it listed. So we already knew it was eligible. Mr. Oblovi took the next step, which is to formally request to nominate that it be listed. That application was considered by the California Historic Review Commission, and on February 7th, the commission at a hearing in Sacramento voted to essentially accept that nomination, and in turn they have forwarded that nomination to the keeper of the National Register in Washington, D.C. And it's the keeper of the National Register who actually puts it on. But the process is the state agency has to forward that recommendation. So that is what has transpired. Very important, the way the laws are written, the laws I talked about, whether it's the 4F or the National Historic Preservation, from our perspective, it makes no difference whether it's eligible or actually on. We treat it as if it's on. So once it's determined to be eligible, for us, it's the same as if it were actually on. So in terms of the work we're doing and all the work to try and minimize any harm, that doesn't change anything we are doing.
Mike, did you want to add to that?
Well, the laws, I'm going to quote the law here, but the idea is that there has to be a preponderance of evidence that it is not historic before it could be not considered historic. So the whole environmental process requires thinking about the bridge as an historic bridge and using, I mentioned the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation as the methodology, the filter by which to think about how to repair and fix the bridge, the rehabilitation of the bridge as a formal process. So it's already in process. We've accepted it as a historic resource, whether it's listed or not. Environmental processes don't necessarily require listing, so it is, and thus we will be looking at options and how to rehabilitate the bridge.
Can I ask one more question then? As the status is imminent that it will become this, does that make a difference in the fact that one cannot tear down a historical bridge, or one has to accommodate it as is and then refurbish it without adding lanes? Does it make a difference?
Being on the National Register has nothing to do with preserving in and of itself the bridge. You can be on the National Register and the resource can be torn down. That's the way the National Register works. It's the environmental processes that create the protection. And in California, most states don't have a secondary environmental process. California has a secondary process, the California Environmental Quality Act. So you've got the federal, NEPA, and you have CEQA. So you have two processes that we're dealing with to protect or evaluate the historic resource. As a locally listed resource, you don't have any local, I don't know what your local ordinance is regarding protections of your local historic resources. I'm just not familiar with it today. So
is that something you're going to find out?
It will be fun of it. Remember, we're going through the process of evaluating a rehabilitation option. So that's part of this process.
Okay, thank you. David, followed by Amy Lothringer.
As I approach, just a couple of quick questions, if I could. Clarification from before.
And again, you're using your time because we're not going to do the back and forth. So please get over, and then we'll get your questions in, and we'll get
There
the
are
answers.
two quick questions. You have said rehabilitate and widen. You really meant rehabilitate or widen. Correct.
We'll get that answered. So let's
Excuse me, could you move over a little bit so we can hear better?
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
The other question is, have we determined who's boring those holes in the bridge yet?
Okay, we'll get that answered afterwards.
Okay. Money is driving this bridge alternatives issue. Our city council doesn't understand that federal grant money will support either of our bridge choices, which is replace or repair. That is according to California and federal law. The 2 minutes allowed here doesn't give us a chance to explain that. And to be sure that I can more fully communicate, please take this as my formal insistence that I be included in the CEQA process as a member of the Half Moon Bay History Association. That gives me some credential on your list of consulting parties under the rules of Section 106 of the Federal Preservation Act of 1966. Thanks. Where, how can I sign up and be included on this list of consulting parties? And others in this room might be interested in that. How about the bridge? Money is driving this issue. $8 million versus $1 million. Building a new bridge or fix the historic bridge. 8 million or 1 million. Make the bridge into a 30-foot wide roadway, or leave it at its present 24 feet. 8 million, 1 million. Follow the current standards for modern highways. That's referred to as the AASHTO guidelines. That's that same thing, or follow common sense. Main Street's only 24 feet wide. 8 million, 1 million. The feds will give us 88% grant money either way. Build a new bridge, fix the historic bridge. We can be given the federal grant of 88% at either cost. We all want the city to use its money prudently. This whole problem may have been caused by paying a consultant in the first place. Consultant suppliers It's just the nature of the beast to tell us what we should do. Not a good idea to hire someone to ask them to tell us how big a job they should hire them for. It's just strategy than hiring people. The third consultant, Biggs Cardosa, had no axe to grind. And maybe that's why they pointed out, along with others before, they as a consultant to Half Moon Bay pointed out that the bridge is not likely to collapse and recommended saving it as part of their so-called option 5. But they did go on to say option 5 should widen the bridge and get that big federal grant. The community submitted option 5A, and now I understand Mr. Bloby's submitting another one, which also deserves the same serious consideration without widening it. The city asked for a 24-foot width exception. It is an exception to that AASHTO requirement. And we will get the federal grant. That also, by the way, takes care of the ADA compliance and the water main, saves the bridge, keeps everything calm and small, and costs $1.2 million. But the important thing about that road width exception is the city must ask for it. Who's going to advise the city to ask for it? Does it have to be the citizens, or can our paid consultants please say, ask for the exception? They must say it is logical, feasible, and will preserve a certified historic bridge. They are practically certain to be allowed that exception, as you know. That is both feasible and prudent. The city saves millions of dollars, doesn't disrupt traffic, and saves its historic structure.
Okay, David, let's get your questions. Let's get David's questions answered. So he started with rehab and widen versus rehab or widen. Does somebody want to speak to that, John?
We're looking at both.
Looking at both. Second, the question is, who is going to be boring the holes? Do we know?
Who did bore the holes?
Who did bore the holes?
We're not aware, it's not part of the city's effort to bore any holes. There's nothing that we have done so far.
So Rob, any
Yeah, I just
additional?
concur that. Thank you for the heads up. We're going to actually go look at it for ourselves. But we don't know of anybody boring the holes.
And then finally, can someone speak to David's suggestion about the roadway width exception? Is there something in process? Is there a point in time where something like that would be asked for?
Well, I don't think we can answer that now, but we do know, we do have correspondence where we can ask for an exception, as you pointed out. There is some at risk if we don't bring it up to the 80, if it's a rehab only, and we don't bring it up to the 80, which is identified over on the chart, that we would be subject to losing that federal money for the next 10 years. So
That's why we need to talk more, not within the 2-minute time frame.
Okay, so
and there's more information we can share about it. And we have that information that we can provide to the website as well.
okay, we'll get that on the web. All right, the next speaker is Amy. Amy Luthringer is with the Bicycle Coalition. Amy will be followed by John Ullum. Yeah, you can do it either way. Again, you're not making it yourself any louder. This is just for recording for the purposes.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Sabrina Brennan, and I'm here today speaking for Amy Luthringer, who couldn't be with us this morning.
How did I get her?
Because I'm speaking for her. So that's her speaker slip.
If she left, she was here and
So I
left.
can hear you better, ma'am?
Oh,
So I
yeah,
can hear you
sure.
better.
So I don't want to lose my 2 minutes, so I'm going to continue on. So I brought a letter from Amy Luthringer, who is the safety officer for the Coastside Bicycle Coalition. And I'm not going to read the whole letter, but I'll read part of it to save time. The Coastside Bicycle Coalition is committed to increasing transportation options. However, we don't support rebuilding the Main Street Bridge. The current bridge provides an important traffic calming feature. The parking and traffic configuration on Main Street is such that drivers must travel slowly and bicyclists are able to ride in the slow flow of traffic. The walkways on the bridge and the sidewalks along Main Street are free of bicycles and safe for pedestrians. In short, we like the European traffic calming effect of the original bridge design and don't want to lose that. Please repair the existing bridge and maintain the 24-foot road width. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. It seems like that was more of a traffic calming virtues, so not a question in there. Thank you very much for reading Amy's letter. John has spoken similar comments, it looks like, on Monday nights, so welcome, John, again. And then Luciano Arunda, who was also, I believe, here on Monday, is the next person to speak.
Not many comments, other than it's been alleged multiple times by most of our city council members that the bridge is in such a state that it could imminently collapse at any time. Our mayor said that at the last meeting. He said that the bridge could collapse between June and November. And that's why we wanted to move up the referendum, because it might collapse before November. And so I've never heard any quantification of, what are the risks? Is this bridge these bridges routinely fail in earthquakes? Have they ever failed in California catastrophically? I know there's a difference. It could become unusable for a time. But has that ever just failed? Just dropped into the river? Or just immediately become unusable where life was lost, or it would have been if somebody had been on the bridge? We've never heard talk about that. I know I've looked at I saw something that you have put out today. You talked about sight lines being inadequate. Well, quantify that. How far should it be? How far is it? It must obviously matter as far as the speed that people are going when they encounter these sight line things. So how is all that put together? We've heard lots of allegorical data, a lot of things like the bridge is only suitable for horse and carriage. One of our city council members has said that. We've heard people say, the mayor say that he didn't really support testing the bridge because he felt that once you opened it up, we were going to find one sick puppy. We've heard another mayor allege that the bridge is not looking so good, and that was his reason for not wanting to test the bridge. So we have brought up the testing for over a year and have been rebuffed on it. And so I'd like to hear people talk about how safe is this bridge? I mean, how accurate are these allegations and suppositions being made by our city council? Thanks.
Thank you, John. So I heard three questions in there. Let's start with the testing. I think we've made it fairly clear that testing is planned for in the near future, and the results will be available at hopefully the meeting, which will be late spring, summer. That's the planning meeting. Sightlines, quantification of that, Ramsey, is that something that goes in the environmental document or something that could be prepared and put on the website?
Could be prepared and put on the website.
Okay. So
but somebody said though that it had inadequate sightlines. So quantify it. Who said it? Is that accurate? Has it been determined? Is it just someone's opinion, or is there some sort of like?
We will provide some graphics to illustrate what the standards should be and what the current standards are.
Well, that'd be great, but they're already asserting that without having provided these standards, and so it's getting out there in the community. All people like us who pay close attention to this particular issue will get that information, but somebody may casually read this stuff and not follow up on it and have this opinion that we have a really dangerous bridge, it's going to collapse, or it's got horrible sight lines. And none of this is ever quantified. This is just like I could have made it up.
So John, I'm answering your questions and getting them answered. So we will get graphics up on the website as far as controlling what elected officials or other community members interact with that new information, or what they say. That's not something I believe that the team here can really address at the meeting today anyway. And then the risks, is there somebody who can talk about quantification of the collapse risk? Is there some process by which that gets either documented in the environmental document or somewhere else? Anybody?
There has been some documentation that there is not an expectation that this bridge will collapse. However, the weak points are the spandrel walls that are holding the sidewalk and the water line. And the risk is that there would be some displacement or movement of those spandrel walls, which would lead to a sidewalk failure
the water line may cause more damage with the water coming out of the broken main, and the roadway would be basically unpassable. But reading through some other opinions is that there is no likelihood of a catastrophic collapse, more of a damage that would then make the area or the roadway inoperable. Sidewalks will probably fall down. If there's somebody on the sidewalk, there might be some danger of something happening there.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John, for your questions. Thank you, Ramsey, for the additional information. Luciaro, please. Time. And he'll be followed by Chad, take 2.
So I got no animation today.
Yeah, that was.
So my name is Luciano Arruda, and so I have 3 questions. The first one is, it's about questions. We all have questions. Everybody asks many questions. We ask questions multiple times, and I don't know what was the answer to some of the questions that were posed. I don't know if you're going to answer the questions from the last meeting, when and how. So I wanted to know clearly today. I want to know, will every question be answered, and will it be posted the way it was asked with the answer? This was the person who asked on this day, and this was the answer. Will that be made public? Or will I be wondering whether his question about the project he submitted, was it answered, was it considered or not? Because you're saying you're going to consider another project, but we don't really know, right? So I want to ask you to post every question with the name and the date and the answer, so that we know that our individual questions have been answered. If we repeat the question, then you can maybe bundle the questions were asked by all these people, and this is the answer. So that's my first question request. The second one is, I wanted to know who made the decision to not test the bridge and go forth with all the other things that need to be done anyway, but testing not needed. And when was that decision made? So that's a direct question that I wanted to know the answer. Okay? And then my last question is there any chance that after all the study and all the geologists and everybody who's being brought into this project is done, is there a chance that if the bridge is built 4 years later or 3 years later, that we're going to have to test again and do the study again? For whatever reason, heavy rain, earthquake, other things. So those are my questions.
Okay, let's see if we can get some of those answered right now. So the first question is, will there be a formal document transcribing the transcription of the tape from Monday night and today with people's names and their questions, and then some sort of answer made?
Well, let me try and answer based on the history. If some of you said you were familiar with the city's website, if you've been there, you'll know that there are some 38, 40 some questions that have been posed over a period of time about what are we doing, how did we get here, and what are some of the options. So I would see those questions that's been raised both Monday as well as today be posted there with the answers. Now, in the past, it has not listed the person's name who asked the question. And so I don't know if that was determined by the folks who didn't want to have their names associated with the questions, or if there was some other public reason not to do that. But your questions will be answered and posted on the website as we move forward.
The second question is, who made the decision not to test the bridge and when?
That would be on the website. I'm going to do this from memory. So my understanding is that when the city council first, back in 2013, early 2013, started looking at just the replacement option, or looking at it as their preferred option, there wasn't a necessary reason to test it if there was in fact going to be a replacement. As we then unfold, going through the process and looking at other options, you begin looking at, well, we need to do a variety of tests. And I also want to mention, it's not that we're just testing the bridge. We're going to be testing, its footings, its foundations, the soil around it, a whole variety of things that need to be tested. And then plans need to be put in place depending on what we find.
And so the final question that he had was, is there any chance of basically starting this whole process again if some project is built and then something happens 3 or 4 years down the road?
We would plan not to have that a requirement to do any post-testing. There would be probably inspections continuing every 2 years afterwards. Those will be visual inspections, but we would not plan to have a need for any subsequent testing done on the bridge.
And then aren't you going to whichever, whether it's a rehab or a redo, it would be meeting current seismic standards and other kinds of catastrophic
Correct.
requirements that probably weren't in place when this was first put together? Okay, before I ask Chad up to redo, are there other people who have not yet spoken that want to speak before I go back around and take a couple of people who might want to speak again? All right, seeing none, Chad, you're up. And then it looks like I also have a hand there for George. George, did you want to speak after Chad? Is that what that hand's for? No problem. Let me get your card back out. All right, Chad, you're on.
I would just like to suggest that an alternative for the way to rehab the bridge would be to strip the sidewalks off of it and leave the original bridge the way it was prior to whatever that west sidewalk date is, 1941 or something. Leave the arch, leave the width, leave the guardrails, obviously do some repair to the spandrels and the wing walls. Those things are necessary. Then additional bridges could be built parallel to that bridge and probably about 10 feet off of them. Take a careful look at the sidewalks that approach the bridge in front of both Pasta Moon and the Zabella House. You will see that if those sidewalks went straight rather than on the Pasta Moon side hitting a couple of 90-degree things and on the other side kind of a sweep. If those sidewalks went straight onto free-span pedestrian bridges, those could probably be built elsewhere and craned in place. Maybe they echo the shape of the bridge that's there now, although that seems to me would have a great deal more environmental impact with footings in the creek and so on. You don't have that H24 rating requirement for pedestrian bridges. They can be very lightweight, very inexpensive, and you take care of the sidewalk ADA issues. In addition to that, removing, well, certainly on the west side of the bridge could be engineered so it could carry a 16-inch ductile iron water main, which is what's needed in there now. And then it seems to me if they're built in a long enough span, you get out of that creek and you get away from a great many of those environmental issues that you're concerned about. I'm surprised to hear you say that even if the work is limited to rehabilitation of the existing structure, and then perhaps the suggestion I just made for very long span structures that are supported well up on the creek banks, you still need to get, the Army Corps of Engineers and federal and state Fish and Wildlife. Isn't there a point where you get up out of the water and you don't need to do all that? It is the assumption now being made prior to testing that somehow you're going to need to get down in there and work on pile caps and footings and underpinnings, things that from the structural drawings and a visual inspection of the bridge look like they're good. It looks like the problems are up higher than that. So I'm once again concerned that we'll spend some endless amount of money, and I don't know what it is, on a whole lot of consultants doing a whole lot of work that at the end of the day turns out not to have been necessary at all, because we have considered a series of options that we're not going to steer completely away from. Mr. McAdoo came up with a very interesting design alternative, once again, prior to any knowledge of the existing structure of the bridge. Now that we know how that bridge is built, his idea can be upgraded further with free-span bridges. That his initial idea, the supplemental support for the arch with some I-beams and so on, those things don't even appear to be necessary given what we now know about the bridge. At least that's my understanding of it. I'm no structural engineer, but I've been around the block a few times, and I think there's some pretty good knowledge in this town about what's going on, what can be done to that bridge. It's my hope that the alternative approaches will be looked at carefully before, pick a number, get spent on environmental and engineering studies that may prove moot.
Okay, thank you. So I did hear a question in there. One, I heard a new alternative, so thank you for that. And some reference to additional previous alternatives. But I heard a question in there, isn't there a point where some of these regulatory agencies aren't necessary anymore? And John, I think it would be helpful if you clarify that.
Good question. Basically, if the rehab is limited to repairs up on top of the bridge, like on the deck for railing, and you don't have to get down below the bridge at all, then you do not need those permits. Anything more than that, you do need the permits. I am working on many of what they call preventive maintenance bridge projects in the Bay Area. And once somebody wants to go underneath the bridge, for even on a temporary basis, all those permits and studies come into place. We could argue, whether that's correct or not, but I can tell you from a regulatory perspective, if I submit an application to the Department of Fish and Wildlife so that rehab work can be done, they're going to ask for all the studies, and it's just the nature of regulations in today's world.
Okay. George, you're on take 2, and unfortunately I'm going to ask you to, if you would, stand up nearer to the mic. Chad has a nice strong voice like I do. I think we might be cousins in that category.
Voice is stronger than mine?
Yeah, no, we need your voice. Okay, and you would like to speak again, you're Johanna, right? Okay, and Johanna will follow George.
Well, now this is kind of messing me up because my initial comment is to address a question.
And David, okay.
Is to address a question that Mr. Renner provided on a comment that I made earlier. I made a comment that over $500,000 has already been spent on this project, and you challenged that. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but you said, hey, I'd like to know. Well, the first part of that was a $1.13 million signing with URS, but that was done in 2010. And we've done nothing but pour money on this issue ever since. So I can provide you the listing of the $500,000 plus, but I think we're getting closer to the big boy than we are at the midpoint. If you'd like that, I'd be more than happy to provide that for you. And then if you would, if you agree to that, then what I would ask is that you put those numbers that we've come to, that we've expended on this particular matter, and it will be short because it's hard to quantify staff time, because we don't know the different rates of hours that people have spent. But I'm more than happy to provide that data for you. If you would be so kind as to publish it on the city website on the bridge project, I can do that for you if that's what you'd like. Secondly, and this is probably really the critical question, because as I mentioned earlier, the city's entire foundation is resting on the SRA 124. Our city engineer, who is a consultant, expressed concern over this issue in 2009 and 2010. That then took the lead position to bring URS on board, and we have been dealing with this ever since. Regardless of the fact that the city allegedly didn't make a decision until September of last year, obviously the decision was made well in advance because there was no forensics exam, despite repeated requests. And I don't mean dozens, I mean hundreds, perhaps even thousands of requests for a physical examination of that bridge. So we can add that or detract it from the options available of what to do next. It just makes sense that you have all of the data in front of you before you make a decision. Unfortunately, we don't always do things like that in Half Moon Bay, and it's expensive. So I guess my question then comes down to, I'd like to know, first of all, is this exam going to be independent? Secondly, comprehensive? And thirdly, is there any way, and you're going to have to forgive me here, I know engineers, but I'm not one. But I would like a listing, if we can get that, a complete listing of exactly how that test was taken, what measures were taken, what was looked at, what wasn't, the scope of it, all of it. If we can put that on the city website as well to inform the public, because it is, after all, the public that's paying for this and the public that is taking this risk. Thank you.
Okay, I heard a lot of head nodding, so I think that is accommodatable, if there's such a word. The scope as well as the actual results. Okay. Well, on the website. Yeah, go ahead, Rob. Did
Well,
you
I
want to
just
add
wanted
something?
to go back.
And we've got Johanna, you're on the on-deck circle.
Just on the accounting piece, the words have been said, and I can't quote them, I wouldn't want to hear the tape, but if you've encumbered something, that's not spending it. And I think that's where some of the distinctions have been about the accounting of the money being spent.
Can you explain encumbered, please?
Yeah. So there's actually been a contract issued, and I believe your numbers are pretty accurate with TRS. However, that money has not been spent.
None of it.
Some of it has, yes. And it's spent only on the hours spent for the task.
Like today.
That's right.
Or the shows that you guys put on telling us the virtues of a new bridge.
Exactly.
and all the work that you've done in between to get to those points.
Exactly.
Okay, so
Exactly.
we are looking at over $500,000. We do at least.
Well, we don't know, so we'll get that information on the website. I think that's where we're
I
going to
think
leave it
it's
today. Okay, Johanna?
I have a practical question and two questions, I guess. One
Okay.
is, when does one think that this is going to occur? We're looking at down the road here, it looks like.
And occur meaning construction?
Construction
Okay.
or whatever.
Okay.
Because I live very close to the bridge and I see sometimes massive trucks going over that bridge. And I have spoken at one point to somebody on the council briefly to say, can we put a truck route so that the trucks have to come in the back way and come over Kelly and come downtown, the huge trucks that come in for various, deliveries and things like that. Because if the bridge is a little off and we have to replace it, why are these massive trucks still going over there? Is there something that can be done quickly to change that? And is that a city issue, or is it because it's Highway 92? Is it become a state issue, and how long would that take to put in place?
Okay, I hear two questions. Number one is, when would construction begin? Ramsey, John, what's the current construction?
Yeah, the earliest 2017, probably 2018, so you're looking at least 3 years out.
A lot of trucks going on.
Okay, and then in the meantime, the question is, can a truck route be set that takes them over Kelly or another route in, and who would be the one to put that truck route in place? Is that something the city can look into and coordinate with Caltrans as appropriate? So we'll have Rob look into that and coordinate with Caltrans as appropriate.
And then, if you're familiar with this, how long will that take? Is that a half a year project? Something like that?
Setting up a truck route?
Yeah.
Well, I have to look into that.
I mean, is that normal, about half a year? It would seem.
I don't know.
It's not a week, is it? Okay, so somewhere between a week and a half and 6 months. Is that sort of logical to assume? But I'm just trying to say, let's expedite it.
I think your point's well taken. I don't think these people have enough information to be able to give you an answer today of whether 6 months is too much, too soon, way too long, etc. So suffice it to say, Rob is on it. Okay, David, you're next. And David, the other David, would like another go at this.
Should we try a cappella? So George actually hit on a topic I was gonna bring up, and I think I can answer a few questions.
Okay, we need to hear you.
Sorry. In regards to the money that has been spent, city records, warrants pulled from the city agenda reports show that since the inception of this project, and I have to, you are relatively new to this, but the city council voted on July 6th, 2010, the initiative was placed to replace the Main Street Bridge. It was not 2013, it was 2010. Since that time, CSG has spent $100,000. We have paid CSG, I've seen the invoices, I've seen the check numbers. Biggs Cardoza got $40,000 for their review of the process. Tony Condati, just over the past year, we haven't gone back farther than that, has billed roughly $200,000 as the project manager for the bridge. The good news is you're a lot cheaper than he is, so that gives me some reassurance. And URS, as of November, had passed through $200,000 of checks that we have written to them for this project. And that does not count all the other consultants and everything else. Those are just the main players, okay? My math, that comes up to $540,000. It's not something that's been budgeted. It's money we have paid to all of you. Well, I haven't seen that. So that was the first thing. The second thing is, and you want us to take you seriously, and I think I can speak for the community when I say we really are trying to take you seriously. Slide 9 on your PowerPoint presentation, I don't know if you want to look at it. I went to the website and pulled it up just so it's here.
Okay. Caroline, can we get it so everyone can see it?
20 minutes ago or so, I'm not sure who it was.
Which one's not?
Slide 9.
Project Alternatives?
Project Alternatives,
yeah.
part of Ramsey's.
If it matches the
fairly
website,
early
then
on.
it's, there we go. Okay, perfect. So someone up here said with a straight face, we're considering rehabilitation with widening. You're not. You came into this meeting with no project alternative, a rehabilitation with widening alternative, and a replacement alternative. There are not 4 alternatives. You've said all along, there's 3 alternatives. This is ridiculous.
Okay, so we'll get clarity on that. Anything else?
The third thing, the initiative process. And you misstated this, Eileen, in the beginning, and I'd just like to address this very quickly. The City Council has put a Main Street Bridge Preservation Act on the June ballot, or they're trying to at any rate. The Citizens Main Street Bridge Preservation Act has nothing to do with that. They're not related. Nothing is going to be resolved. And the November initiative, not only does it contain the full text and enforcement of the initiative, it will end up basically defeating whatever happens in June because there will be more electors. So the whole thing is, you know what, it doesn't matter. It's a waste of time or not is not the point. The point is co-opting and conflating our initiative process, which we're going through now, we're gathering signatures, a legitimate process, and implying and imputing that the city has taken that and done a good thing and put it on the ballot. It's simply not true. No matter what happens, the city's doing their thing, and they're entitled to do it, and we're doing our thing. And the two are not the same, they're not similar, other than the fact that the city took the same title, which was its own.
Okay, so David, since you're just saying that, I never implied anything was a good thing. I was just stating
Fair enough. No,
what I understood. You're putting words in my mouth, and that is not fair.
And then I do apologize for that.
Thank
so
you.
I'm very sorry.
So I want to see that in the blog. That's clear.
So you read us, fully recorded, they all
I think that's it.
Okay, great. Let's get a question clarified about the alternatives, about 3 versus potentially 4 or more. John?
So,
And
put
then
these
David
together
Hernandez.
to give you a flavor of what we were thinking about, some initial thoughts. That does not conflict with what we're saying here today. I mean, the whole part of the process is to hear what the input is, and we've heard loud and clear. May I finish?
You can. Just add the 4th alternative. Why not? If you're just throwing things out there, why not add it?
Did you not hear us say?
I believe they already agreed to do
Like
that.
3 times we said today.
We're considering. Fair enough.
That we will look at.
Look at it and
We're
see it on
kind
the
of,
slide are two different things, John.
If we come in here and we have everything defined, criticism we get at these meetings is, you've already decided everything, what are we here for? But if we come in with an open mind, now we're getting a criticism that we haven't done enough. So we're kind of in a no-win. We've heard you loud and clear. We are going to look at widening only, rehab only, and we're looking at rehab plus widening. So
How are you going to do that?
We're taking all this.
What is that process going to involve?
We're going to go through a very careful process of looking at the objective of the project, and what are the ways that we can feasibly attain that objective. And that objective takes as, go to the slide, go back to the slide, it shows, keep going back. Keep going, right there. So, the City Council, at its April 9th meeting, 2013, they have set these as the objectives. These are the things they would like taken into account in coming up with alternatives. So anything that we do, we're going to be looking at how do the various options, and there's all kinds of combinations and permutations, how can they achieve these objectives? That's the criteria we are going to be using.
To throw this to Mr. Gavalia?
Garibaldi. Second
Sorry, I
G is
actually remember this. You have, so let's say you're duly considering a rehab and widening, and you're considering a rehab. And if they both meet those project objectives, which can be done, frankly, then the rehab has to take precedence because of both the Department of Interior, AASHTO, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Yes?
I'll let John answer that filtering. I'm here basically to help establish a rehabilitation scenarios. What complies with the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation?
And minimizing impact. Minimizing an impact of the bridge would be not modifying it. So they both meet the standards. The one that modifies it less would be...
The exact terminology and the case law behind it, I'll let John better clarify, because again, that is in this process, I do not provide that determination. That is another. I am not an arbiter of the outcomes. I am helping establish concepts that comply with the Secretary of State's for rehabilitation. So.
Okay, John, do you want to clarify that, and then if you could state its term?
Sure. So, in an ideal world, if historic preservation is your only criterion, right, you would obviously choose to do something that wouldn't adversely affect that historic resource. However, in the real world, right, there are thousands of bridges nationwide that are historic, that are in need of rehab or some kind of remedial work. So the regulations recognize that fact, and in fact, in some cases, there is no feasible alternative other than to demolish and rebuild. That said, you're not allowed to get to that point without looking at all the other criteria, including what the council has set forth. To answer your question specifically, if at the end of the day there was an alternative, let's say it's rehab only, that pretty much met all these criteria as to the same degree as the replacement or a rehab plus widening, and the rehab only had the least impact on a historic resource, under the federal law, you would have to choose that one.
Under 4F.
All other, under 4F, all other factors being equal. That last phrase I just said, all other factors being equal, is important because in the real world, sometimes you can't do everything. I mean, the reason we're having all of this is there's a lot of competing issues from, you know, the merchants wanting to make sure traffic and access is maintained. That's a key issue. We've got environmental, we've got historic. There's a lot of things that are competing here. So, and that's kind of how the council got to its, its 5 priorities.
Okay.
So, and on that, very, very important. And George, you brought this up at the beginning. You mentioned the whole process, and is it really a sham? And how could I stand up and say we have open minds when the council made its decision on September 17th? I read those minutes. I know exactly, you are absolutely right. They did identify a preferred alternative. But what I'm here to say is, in my experience doing this for many, many years, it is not uncommon for a city council or a board of supervisors or some regulatory decision-making body to identify a preferred alternative based on information they have at the time. They're free to do that. However, in terms of what we are looking for in the law and what we are following, I don't really take that into account. Yes, I know that they identified it, but in my analysis, I'm still looking at the facts. So I am not going into this with a bias or emphasis toward that replacement option that they identified. That is not what the process is about. If I were to do that, I would be really subverting the entire process.
It's good to hear you say that, John, and it's good to clarify the quote that you made earlier. I appreciate that.
And I can tell you from experience, there are many projects where what is actually done has no relationship to some preferred alternative that was identified at some earlier point.
Maybe that'll be the case here.
We don't know.
And certainly, John and I have worked on projects before where that has absolutely happened.
Right.
As I bring David up, that's a good time for me to clarify why I was so strict with Dave just a little bit ago. As a professional facilitator, I am a neutral party. I am attempting to get you answers here today. I am not coming in here trying to sell a ballot initiative, and I was very taken by that
And I did
implication.
not mean to convey that, so my apologies.
Yeah, because professionally speaking, I mean, I need to keep my neutrality, and that is what I'm here for, to get communication going. So, David, you're on, and I believe you are our last speaker, unless someone else is planning to go again. Okay, if you could come over, because you're also soft-spoken, to come over to our mic.
I thought I was very bold in my speech.
I'm going to accuse
Yes.
of speaking softly.
Well, maybe it's you got a cold like Lenny, I don't know, but you seemed a little quieter certainly than George.
This one's really pretty quick, and I do pride myself on being naive and thinking that the best is always going to turn out. And I will say the flavor of this meeting really is much more positive and interactive than other meetings that I've attended before. So thanks and hats off. However, this virus of a little bit of cynicism must have affected me between the beginning of this meeting and the end of the meeting. So I thought I'd make the suggestion, or put it in the form of a question so it can get responded to. There's a protocol of tests that need to be done. The one we all refer to is the one that bores holes in the bridge and evaluates the crushability of the concrete. But there's a series of tests that are needed to evaluate the structural integrity of the bridge, which we assume it's going to pass. I would hope that we get an independent supplier to do those tests and write up the analysis of those tests, rather than the supplier who's probably capable of doing at URS, and have somebody independent do that testing. I think you're likely to subcontract it, but not to one of your interlocking corporate holdings, I hope. So just something to consider that would keep any whiff of, oh my gosh, the deck's being stacked.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, let's get an answer to that, Rob.
I will just let you know that it is not unusual for the testing agency to be hired separately by the city in this case. And that would be done through an RFP process, where we have a scope of work, it'd be published, and if people would respond, giving us not only how they would do it, or preferred how they do it, but a cost for that as well. All that's public information if you, through the RFP process and hiring.
So is that what you're planning to do then?
Yes.
You'll go
Would
through a
that
separate
be
RFP?
noticed on a council meeting for discussion and vote, or is that something that goes on behind the scenes that we aren't aware of? Because I would offer the suggestion, use the one that Woodside's using. Price seems right, they can do 5 bridges for 159, I don't see why we can't do one for a hell of a lot less.
Well,
Okay, so they'll look into the Woodside
I'm not being
vendor.
facetious, I'm just saying, there's an example, a very good example of what they're doing to do here.
and they'll be allowed to participate in the RFP process.
So they'll
Whatever that
research
firm
it, make
is.
sure they get an RFP. Okay, we'll take that as an action item. Luciano, I see your hand up.
You haven't,
Oh,
Yeah,
an
for that
RFP?
RFP?
No, we're putting together the protocol and what we want to have tested.
So maybe within a month or
So
6
it's you
weeks or
guys that are
something?
determining the comprehensive abilities of this test.
That's correct.
Thank you.
But that scope would be in the RFP, which is a public
Absolutely.
document, so you'll get a chance to look at it. And that will be posted. All right, Luciano, if you want to speak again, I'm going to ask you to come forward. So we
I'll
get
be
it.
very quick. In the last meeting, if I recall correctly, the last sentences at the end of the meeting was that because of the questions that came up, I think the response was, wow, we haven't done really a good job at educating people about the project. So the questions are not changing too much. What is the education that we need to get about? Or just a quick comment, because the meeting isn't going to end, right? So,
Right.
what do we need to learn more so that we can participate more effectively in the meetings? That's really the intention.
Okay, let's get an answer to that. John?
I think you referred to a comment I made at the meeting about what I'm hearing is a lot of questions about why do we need to do this? Is it safe or is it not? And I said, I'm hearing that loud and clear, and we need to do a better job of explaining the whole purpose and need of the project. So what I do when I hear that kind of a question is through the information that we're gathering, through the testing, in the environmental document where we talk about purpose and need, we need to do a thorough job in layman's terms about explaining what it is that we're doing and the reason for it. So, and I mean, these are all very, very good questions. You know, for example, a lot of people are saying, if you're saying it's not safe, why are people on it today? I mean, you're trying to understand how both can be true. And so what I'm saying is, we're gonna try and do the best job possible to better explain all those concepts.
Okay, all right, so I just have a couple minutes to go, and again, reminding you, March 31st, so several of you have gone through a couple of times on Monday, and again, a couple of times today asking questions. We did try and give as many answers as we could, get out information today. Please check the website. It sounds like Rob is going to be doing a lot of posting of information and materials. So maybe paying yourselves to get back out there regularly. I see a lot of hands up, and again, I'm closing down the meeting. You have an opportunity to get us comments. I think these folks will stay. It's almost noon. I'm going to turn it over to Rob for some final comments, because I kind of stole his thunder on Monday night. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob for final comments.
All right, good. Thank you very much. First of all, just draw your attention back to the slide. The many ways that you can continue participating in this part of the process until the end of the month. And then I just wanted to again thank all of you for coming. I had a chance to meet many of you on Monday night, a couple more of you today. I'll have a chance to continue meeting you as we go through this process. Look forward to hearing from you. My phone number and I have an email address as well that should be posted on the website, but I do have a few business cards if any of you would like them. I also want to thank the panel for coming and spending on Saturday as well. And in particular, I want to thank Daisy in the back, who's been really, and Caroline here in the front. I appreciate, again, this open process that we're going through. I appreciate the fact that you're letting us participate in that. Thank you for your words that we are all in this together, and we're working to make it the best project possible. Okay. And with that, I think I'll just close it at that. Thank you again.
Thank you. I'll take one of those cards.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to the outer limits.